Good evening. I am genuinely happy to see you guys here. It's been so much fun to watch you all walk into the room because I know so many of you, and so many of you are so meaningful to me. And so it is really my pleasure, and I'm truly, truly grateful that you've taken the time to come here and just to be here with me tonight. It's humbling, and it's also just a huge honor to have this opportunity to talk to you about some of the things that I've learned in my life and in my studies. And so let's just get started, right? So I love maps. Maybe you all are aware of that, but I thought I would put one up here so you could maybe track where you're from or where your family is. And I thought this one was fun and colorful, but I wanted to give you some context of where I came from and how I got to this point in my life so far. So I grew up in Kentucky, and I was born and raised on a farm in Kentucky. I went to college in Tennessee, and in Tennessee I met my husband, who is here tonight. And we, during that time, I also spent some time in Arkansas, and actually it was in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas that I first learned to speak Spanish. So I may be the only person that learned Spanish in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas, but that is really the truth of kind of where I traveled. After my husband and I got married, we graduated from college and we moved to Texas. So here's some photos of that. So that was us on our wedding day, and then there we are graduating from college. We were already married at that point, and then there's me graduating from seminary. After we lived in Texas for a little while, we moved to Florida, and I got a Master's of Divinity in seminary, and so I graduated and I had these degrees, and then something happened. We decided that we wanted to start a family, so I went to my doctor's appointment with my first pregnancy, and we got a diagnosis, and everything changed. So on that day, we found out that the baby that was growing inside of me had some problems, some pretty serious problems, and that we would have to start making decisions. And so what happened was we decided that we would pursue whatever possibilities we could to save our child. And that meant that I went into the hospital, and I stayed there for 7 weeks and went under all these procedures, and then our child was born. He was 9 weeks early, and then he was in the NICU for 4.5 months after that. So from April the 15th of 2002 until October the 14th of 2002, exactly 6 months, we were in the hospital. And during that time, I learned a lot. And so much of what I study now was born literally out of his birth and all that happened around him. So there's Will in June of 2002. And so he was 3 pounds, 7 ounces, a hefty little guy. And that was at the beginning of his NICU stay. A lot of things turned for the worse the day after this photo was taken. They took him to surgery to insert a dialysis catheter. He was born with kidney failure, and then he had a brain hemorrhage, and then many other things happened. And so when he went home from the hospital, he was on home dialysis. So we started treating him at home for his kidney failure. And then when he was 2.5, he got a kidney transplant. My mother-in-law donated her kidney, and he has a new kidney now, and he is 15, will be 16 this June, if you've been doing the math and following along, and he is right there in the middle of the auditorium. So, hey, Will. All right, so, it was so much fun to have Will. We decided to have 2 more kids, and so that was them. About 6 or 7 years ago, when one day my husband made the mistake of saying, you say you're going to go get a PhD in 20 years. Why not now? So So I decided to go back to school, and I studied health communication because I had spent a lot of time in medical facilities and talking to doctors and watching parents of children try to communicate and navigate the health system, and I just saw how hard it was and how much people struggled. And I thought, you know what, we have communication problems in medical care, and maybe there's something that I could study, something that I could do to address those issues. So I went back to school and I got my PhD. So my kids grew up a little bit during that time, and they just keep growing like every day. It's amazing how that works. So that's sort of a quick review of where I have been. After I graduated, I applied for a job in the Honors College at USF, because that is the best place to be, right? That's what I thought. So in the opportunity to work in the Honors College, within my first week there, I found out about this service trip to the Dominican Republic, and I said, well, that sounds really great. I want to be involved with that. So I volunteered to lead this service trip to the Dominican Republic. And if you've been on that trip with me, then your picture is on this screen right now. So there you go. You're all photographed, you're all featured. There are lots of photos of the DR, and it's been a very popular trip because the place that we go is really hospitable and welcoming. And it's been so impactful for so many of us because we've gotten the opportunity to get to work with Dr. Carroll, who's actually featured right here. That's Dr. Carroll, and he's incredibly giving, and he sees his work as a service. And he sees his work as something not just to diagnose and treat people, but to really treat the underlying issues that are causing people to be sick. And so I see him as a role model, and as someone that our students can be inspired by in terms of where they want to go and what they want to do in their careers in health, or in entrepreneurship, or in engineering. There's so many things that can be done to improve people's lives and to help them to live well. And our students see that on this trip. And so it's my pleasure to get to accompany them on that, because I get to see those changes take place. And that's really an honor to get to witness that and participate in that. So that is how I got to the place I am right now. And I am frequently asked two questions that I'm going to address here for you tonight. One of them is your name really Grief? Because, you know, I teach a class called Ethics at the End of Life, and my dissertation is on pediatric palliative care. So these are kind of sad topics, and they said, well, that has to be a joke, right? I would like to introduce you to my grandfather and my father, James Grief and James Grief, okay? So I really was born Lindy Grief in Kentucky, and this is a picture. My grandfather has since passed away, but you can see genetics run strong in our family, and if you saw my kids sitting back there, yeah, there's just no getting away from that. So those Grief genes are strong. But you may also wonder, what does it look like to grow up as Lindy Grief? So brace yourselves. Yeah. It was a rough start, okay? So that's my sister and I. One of my friends saw this picture and said, I had no idea you were alive during the Great Depression. So anyhow, my sister went through a period of time, she is also here, she went through a period of time where she refused to smile for any photos, and so she bore that very somber look. But that really isn't depictive of our childhood. It was a pretty easygoing life, although there were plenty of challenges for us. I'm debating on whether I should blank that or leave it up there for you all to enjoy for a little bit longer. So anyhow, we grew up at a time when we had no real tragedy strike us. Probably the worst thing that happened was living in an old farmhouse out in the country. One morning at about 5 o'clock, we woke up to this really horrific smell. Now, if you were from the country, you may know exactly what I am talking about. If you were not from the country, it was a skunk, okay? So a skunk had sprayed in our house, and so we escaped immediately to the front yard, and decided that, you know, we could figure the easiest way to get away from this location of tragedy, you know, the skunk ground zero that was our home. You know, our parents are kind of freaking out. What are we going to do? The house is terrible. It's toxic. And so, you know, the most convenient thing was to get on that big yellow school bus that was going to drive by in a little while and escape to school, right? So we smelled each other and we thought we smelled okay. So we got on the bus and we went to school, where our classmates all said, "Oh my gosh, what is that terrible smell?" And so we went to the office in our respective schools and had our parents come pick us up. And so that house smelled like skunk. When you opened a closet or a draft came through, like you could just get the whiff of it for years. That does not go away. If you can ever secure the basement of your home from skunks, I highly recommend it, because that is just not something you get over quickly. But from that lesson, or from that event, one of the lessons that we learned, something that I learned from my family, was I remember my mom like bursting into tears when my sister and I were demanding to go back to our grandparents' house one day, like 2 weeks after all this had happened, because it still smelled so bad. And my mom was like, "We may not have much, but we are rich in love." And I remember thinking that didn't feel right at the time, but now that I reflect on it, it really was true. I mean, we had a loving home to grow up in, and that was really valuable. And so now I think about the importance of love and people just loving you and knowing that you are loved, and how valuable that is, and that stuff really cannot replace that. I mean, it's great to be in a place that has access to a lot of nice things. We are at a university where we have access to a lot of really nice things. But the value of community and the value of someone loving you is really more important than that, and it's more valuable than that. And that's one of the many lessons that I learned growing up as Lindy Grief. I'm going to take this picture off now. So there's another picture later on, but we'll leave it blank for a little bit. Something else that I learned from my family was, my dad's a baseball coach, and he is also a scout for the Cincinnati Reds, so he knows how to spot good talent. And he would always be able to pick out the most talented athlete on a team. But the person that he really valued was the person who had talent, but who also was always willing to carry the equipment. So if he saw a kid who was really, really talented, but then at the end of the game would pack up the equipment and carry it out for the coach to the car, he was really impressed with that person. And I feel like that is a lesson that he sort of passed along to me, just to understand how valuable it is to have someone who's willing to do a job that maybe seems beneath them in some way. Like, this isn't what you're being paid to do, this isn't what you're expected to do. Maybe people might expect you to be above that, but if you're willing to, if you see a job that needs to be done and you're able to do it, to take care of the small tasks that no one's going to notice. And that was something that my dad really valued in even highly skilled people. And I think that was really important and valuable, and it's something that I see and value in my students now. Students who are willing to be, you know, behind the scenes doing things that other people aren't going to recognize. They're not going to get a grade off of it, but it's a demonstration of kindness or of helpfulness or of just thinking about other people and how the things that they do can have a positive impact on other people. And I really value others who are able to do that, and I try to do that if I can myself. Some other things that my parents taught me were to go places. So I had the distinguished honor of being born in Paducah, Kentucky, but a few months before I was born, my parents lived in Naples, Italy, and my sister was born in Naples, Italy. So when people ask her where she was born, she says Naples, Italy. When they ask me where I was born, it's Paducah, Kentucky. So those are both great places. But when my parents were living in Italy, my dad was in the military, and they took that as an opportunity to travel around Western Europe. So I grew up seeing the slides, like the literal slides, you know, like, right, that one's upside down. Okay, so that, I saw those, I watched those slides on the wall in our farmhouse where there was still like a waft of skunk every once in a while, right? So I would see these slides of, you know, Paris and Brussels and, oh, that's Milan, oh, that, and I never got to go to those places, but I thought, oh, this is what you do. Like, you travel, you go places. And so from early on, I started thinking about where I could go, what I could do. And I think that's really important. But it's not just that you go places, it's that when you go somewhere, you show up. And you never underestimate the value of showing up. And that could be to the class that you've signed up for, or it could be to another part of the world that you go to. But being present in a place is really valuable. Sometimes there are events that take place and you think, well, I should go, but, you know, and so you just decide not to because you don't know that it will be good for you. But it definitely won't be good for you if you don't show up to it, right? So never underestimate the value of showing up. It's by showing up to things that I've gotten jobs. I got this job because I showed up to something. I have had the opportunity to meet people that I never would have met if I hadn't shown up to an event and been willing to engage in the place around me with the people that are around me. And I think that's very valuable. So when we go to the Dominican Republic, for example, I really encourage the students to engage with the people around them, like show up to this, because you're only going to be here for this amount of time, and it's really valuable to engage with the people who are next to you, because you're going to get on a plane and go home and you won't have the opportunity for those conversations and that contact again. So the value of showing up is really, really important to me. Treat people with dignity. That's something else that I learned as one of the grief girls when I was growing up, that people have an intrinsic value. So a little lesson on social construction really quickly, okay? All right, this is school, so here we go. This couch is valuable to me, right? So if you've ever been in my office, you know that this couch is in my office, and a lot of my students have come in and sat on it and cried, as is being reflected from the front row here, had, you know, difficult conversations or some sort of just moment of eating a snack or doing something that was meaningful to them, having a conversation, deciding what they're going to write their thesis on, deciding to change a major or to continue on with what they want to do. And so this has value, but it has value because we assign it that value. Anybody could buy this couch for $99, you know, at IKEA like I did a few years ago, and I guarantee you there are many of these couches that were bought at that same time that are in a dumpster somewhere now, right? Because they used them in a dorm room and they got all gross and then they got tossed away, and no one cares about those couches because there's no value ascribed to them anymore. Like, we've socially constructed the value of this thing. We've socially constructed this moment as something that we're making together. But people and the value that people have, I do not believe we socially construct. My opinion or thought about another person is not what gives them value. I believe that what gives a person value is intrinsic, is created into that person, and has nothing to do with what other people think of them. That we have a dignity that we have often forgotten and walked away from. That we have neglected the value of other people in light of our opinions about what they've said or done, maybe, or what they look like, or where they're from. And because of that, we're missing the intrinsic value. I'm getting an amen from the back row over there, so thank you, Will. Thank you very much, buddy. So the value of people, though, I believe is made into us. So and I believe that I've been created in the image of God, and that's not something that someone can just take away from me. And I believe the same thing about other people, and because of that, there's a great dignity that people have. And if you treat people with that dignity, then you're able to see the good in them, but also see the beauty of this really, really diverse human tapestry that we've woven together. And I think that's incredibly valuable, and that we need to keep those things in mind when we talk about the meaning of something. That people don't mean something just because we say they do, but they mean something all in and of themselves. That's something that was begun by my parents and by my family, treating people with dignity. It doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter what you look like, you're a person, and because you're a person, you have dignity. Tied to that is the value of being in community, and particularly for me, the value of being in a community of faith. Now, faith and belief are very popular in our world. In fact, there's at Christmas time, Macy's has this big banner that just says, "Believe," right? And so that's a popular thing that'll pop up. At Christmas time, if you just Google "believe," you'll get like a bajillion Pinterest things, or banners or wooden things with like chalk on them or something. So it's a common thought, but I feel like if you just tell people to have faith or to believe, it's like setting them at an empty table and saying, "Eat." So believe in what? Have faith in what? And being a part of a community of faith is helpful, because then you're with people and trying to figure that out, that faith, that belief in something. And then some people will say, well, you should believe in yourself, right? That you should believe in yourself, because if you try hard enough, you can do anything, and you should believe in yourself. And these are all kind of circular types of philosophies. And while I think that you should have some confidence in what you can do because of who you are and the things that you've learned and the things that you know. If you're sitting in this room, you've done some great things to get here, and you should definitely have confidence. But to only believe in yourself is kind of like picking yourself up. So there's a physicist sitting back here, and it's physically impossible to pick yourself up. Because you have to be anchored to something, and if you're anchored to something, then you're not up. And so Dr. Cross could give us a lesson on that, but I'm not going to ask him to at this moment. But you just can't pick yourself up. Just like if you believe in yourself, then you realize, well, there's plenty of faultiness in there, right? Like, I know myself well enough to know that I am not perfect. And everybody that knows me in this room that spent more than 2 seconds with me can tell you the truth that I am not perfect, right? So if I'm not going to be able to do it myself, then I need to believe in something beyond myself, something bigger than myself. And I feel like being with other people in a community helps me to do that. And my parents instilled that in me as well. So these are all things that I kind of got from growing up in a family that was a family of faith, but also a baseball family and a farm family and all these other things. But one thing that my dad also taught us through his coaching was he taught us to finish strong. So finish strong is what he would say to a pitcher on the mound in the last inning of the game with a couple of outs to go, to kind of say, like, don't just get the exact number of pitches you need, but to think about running like through the finish line. Finish strong, pull up the last bit you've got and go for it and finish strong. And so that was something that I had adopted as well. And I'll put that up there. That was in my office right before I finished my dissertation. I sort of needed that message for myself, to finish strong, keep running that race, keep going, because it is really hard to get through certain tasks in life. And so finishing strong was something that that I saw as really valuable and has kind of been a mantra. But so I told you that I've been asked two questions a lot. One of them is grief really your name? So we've established that yes, that really is my name. The second question that I get asked all the time is, how old are you? So you've probably figured out that I might be a little older than I look, apparently. I'm 43, okay? So I'm not super old, right, guys? Huh? Okay, thank you. But I might be a little older than you would have thought by my personal appearance. But I always think it's really funny because people will say to me, oh, wow, you look so young. What's your secret? Oh, congratulations, even. I've had people congratulate me on looking young. Like, I did it, you know? I'm like, I don't know, it's genetic. It's just what happened. I look young. But it's interesting because it points to something that I study. It points to our fascination with maintaining youth and denying death. Denying that life will end because we so prize being young. We prize being youthful looking and youthful acting and youthfully dressing and maintaining that. And and not that those are bad things, but that they sort of indicate a bigger problem that we have, which ignores that 100% of people, is the statistic last time I checked, eventually die, right? And I say eventually, like that's also cultural. We want to say, well, we'll kick that can down the road as far as we can because we really don't want to talk about that. Talking about the end of life is just not a popular topic. But you all knew that I was going to talk about that. So the question is, why were you dying to come here tonight, right? Okay, yeah, I know. Sorry, that was kind of cheap. All right. So when we ignore the fact that there is an end to life, we miss out on some really good things. And in our culture, there's a poster here that says "Knock 'em dead." Nice. Thank you, Francesca. We miss out on some of the things that we would value otherwise. So what's the best part of March Madness? I know that game starts soon, but we'll be out of here long before it does. So what is the best part of the game? The end, right? I mean, you'll be like, yeah, well, I might watch the first half, but I'm really going to watch the second half, really the second half of the second half, and then we're going to know who wins because a buzzer beater is going to make the highlight reel, but that free throw from, 4.5 minutes into the game, who really cares? So we really like the end of the game. And what about your favorite movie? It has to end well, right? A good book, a good story has to have a good ending. Even a good meal, what does it finish off with? Oh yeah, dessert. So we love the end of everything else. We just don't want to talk about the end of life. But if life is valuable, which I really think it is, and it's so engaging, there's so much richness to it, so much beauty to it, shouldn't we try to think of it so as to end well? So I have finished strong on the slide right now, but I think we should think about that as finishing well. And how could we finish well? What kinds of things could we do to finish well? Well, I think the first thing that we can do is to acknowledge that there is an end. Because by ignoring that, by trying to pretend like there is no end, then sets us up for all kinds of problems when we do come to the end. We don't know how to engage with other people in that. We don't know what to do when someone loses a loved one. We don't know how to talk to them. We don't know how to help them, how to comfort them, because we're just almost paralyzed with fear on saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. Something else that we struggle with is planning for the end. Thinking about what would be the thing that I want to leave behind. How would I like to spend, this amount of time? What most people really value at the end of life is relationships. Being related well to the people around them is incredibly valuable. And so when you are related well to other people, then you feel better and you feel like you're doing something positive. But the way most people in our culture in their life is institutionalized on machines or receiving extreme treatments for diseases that can't be cured. But they're not with their family, they're not involved in close relationships, and they're not comforted. And what happens to those family members when the ending is not very good is then they have to walk away and live with that for the rest of their lives. And so when we're not finishing well, we're really setting one another up for a kind of failure and a lot of hurt and heartache. We're also very isolated. We live in a really individualistic society, so that we do not want to, we don't want to acknowledge the sorrow and the pain with other people. So maybe you're sad and you're upset, but talking about that with someone else is culturally almost like inappropriate, that you're not supposed to be sad. In our culture, it's okay to be angry. Like if something bad happens, we get angry. And anger is a part of taking up justice, right? Because things are wrong and we acknowledge that things are wrong. But if we are always angry and never sad, then we can very quickly become bitter. Because sometimes sadness needs to go with anger. Like I think about those kids at Parkland, right? They're upset and they're doing a lot of really exciting things right now and letting their voices be heard in a way that hasn't really happened before. But it's my hope too that while they're together that they can also be sad, because what they have faced is really tragic. And if we can't be sad together, then we're going to be in a world where we only know how to be angry together. And if you look around at the division that exists in our country and in our society and our world right now, a lot of it is just fueled by this anger. And there's no shared sadness. And so with my bright couch and my cheery disposition, I encourage you to maybe embrace a little more sadness than you've been willing to take up before. If you've seen that movie Inside Out, the sadness character keeps getting Joy makes a circle for her, stay here, don't get out of your circle. Sadness needs to stay away from, getting too involved. But the thing that the little girl, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, the thing the little girl really needs is to feel sadness. She needs to grieve the things that she has lost. And that is a function of grief. You could take it from me because I'm an expert on grief, right? I've known it my whole life, that you need to feel that in order to be able to move forward. And in a world that is constantly cutting people off at sadness, oh no, you can't feel sad. You can feel anger, you can feel injustice, you can feel happy. We'll be happy with you, but you cannot express this sadness or sit in your sadness, and we won't sit with you in it. Then we're not able to really create a community like we might value being in. Because eventually all of us are going to experience that. We're all going to feel that. And it would be helpful to have someone nearby that knew what that was and that was willing to reflect that with us and feel that with us. So what does all this mean? Life is rich, life is mysterious. There are so many valuable things just for the people that I see in this room, people that I value, that I really cherish, close friends that I've known for a long time, students that I've traveled internationally with, people who are in my classes who show up and participate in something with me. I really value that, and what we're doing together is kind of like a construction project. So you see this big table full of Legos over here, and if you've been in my classroom, you've probably been inflicted with this exercise already, but that if you think of life like a big construction project, okay, you think about what you're building. Sometimes we talk about life as a journey, like a path, and we're going somewhere, but I like to think about it as a construction project. And some of the blocks that you're building with, you picked out. You decided what you want to major in, or where you want to go to school, or who your friends are, or where you live. Maybe some of the things that you kind of had help picking. And maybe some of those blocks just got delivered to the construction site and you had absolutely no say in it whatsoever. But they were nonetheless yours to build with, and you had to figure out how to incorporate them. And so as you build your construction project, you're navigating all these different blocks, trying to figure out what to do with them. But you're not doing it alone. And you're not the first one to do it either. So all the things that you're building are built on top of and from and with the people who came before you and the people who are with you. So we build these things together on the foundation that other people have already passed along to us. And then when we leave the construction site, so to speak, okay, we like euphemisms on end of life. So when we leave the construction project, somebody else is going to pick it up and they're going to keep building, right? And so we create this very complicated structure of meaning and existence and life together. But how are we building, and are we building well? Are we acknowledging that we're building with other people and that other people are a part of that project? What they're contributing, what we're contributing to them. It gets messy because eventually you can't quite figure out which part you were doing and what somebody else was doing and where it went, and you lose control over pieces of it, and it goes on and on and on. But together we continue to build. And what are we building, though, is the question. What are we contributing to? And are we doing it thoughtfully? Are we doing it with kindness? Are we doing it treating people with dignity? Are we valuing the things that are actually valuable? Or are we taking up blocks of things that really don't have any good purpose for anyone else? And so I want us to question, like, how are we building? And are we building in such a way as to finish well? But then also, I want to stress that we're not just building alone, and what we're doing, we don't want to put so much like gravity to that we're afraid of messing it up. I was incredibly independent. And then I had a child that I couldn't even get into a building without a lot of help. So I had to learn how to ask for help. That was a really wonderful lesson for me. Because what I learned from that is that people actually like to be helpful. People would say, oh, I really like to be able to come over and help you with your son. I was like, really? You do? But they were genuine, and because these people, they were pretty truthful. I mean, they weren't people who typically lie, and so I assumed that they were telling me the truth. They really liked coming and being a part of this, and that where I was messy and uncoordinated and couldn't do things, other people could. And other people were happy to step in and work with me, and that it wasn't all up to me. It wasn't all about me. It didn't matter if I could do one thing super, super well, but it did matter that I was related to people. It did matter that I loved other people and that they loved me. And those relationships were a whole lot more valuable than what I could do and accomplish perfectly. And I think we put a lot of eggs in that basket of doing things perfectly, when really treating people well, caring for one another, loving, being loved, those are so much more valuable than being perfect. Because the command to be perfect, and I'm looking at a whole bunch of honors college students right now, your command to be perfect is really, really harsh. And some of you just feel it. Like you feel it every single day, and you carry it around with you like this big weight that you have to drag around everywhere you go. And that's really not the way it is. Like, you're not going to be perfect, but that's okay. That's great, because you have your friends, you have each other You can take up the slack for one another. You have people that care about you. You're gonna, this whole crowd over here, they're like, oh, thank you. And the command to be perfect, I feel like, is just so strong that sometimes it feels like you can't move, you can't do anything. But you can do lots of wonderful things. And you're gonna screw stuff up, and it's okay. Like, if y'all gotta be, it would be okay. Really, I promise. It's gonna be all right. So, so these are like my life lessons, I guess. That's what I'm supposed to be telling you. Like, if I had the last thing to say, I mean, honestly, the last thing I say might be like, but I don't know. But this is what it is tonight, so I'm sure I'll keep talking because I just never stop, right? Maybe that's why she put me up here, because she's like, well, she's going to talk anyway. We might as well give her a microphone. But what I hope is that, you know, as I finish now, I'm drawing it up to a close here. So as I finish, I want to encourage you to finish well. That if you don't finish strong, that make sure that you're well related to people so that they help you to get you across the finish line. And that you would make a life such as that other people could finish well around you. To help people finish well, I think, is really important. And so that's pretty much what I have for you. I'm sure I'll have more to say tomorrow, but you won't be here, so come find me. You can come sit on my little yellow couch and we'll talk, and maybe we'll have some snacks, or I might bake brownies, I don't know. But, but I'm really glad that you guys were here. I think we have a little opportunity for a Q&A. I have no idea what you might want to ask me, but I'm going to sit on this couch. And which is all, you see it's in the picture right here. Isn't this so symmetrical? And let you all ask me questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davidson. We will be opening it up to a Q&A. I also wanted to share that if you are sitting in a seat that has a blue tape mark, raise your hand. A blue tape mark on your armrest. Anybody? One. Can I have one? So, for coming, you're going to receive a copy of the last lecture book, which is what our program is based on. So, thank you very much. I wanted to make that announcement. As people start pondering their questions with Dr. Davidson, I also wanted to share that we have a brief reception, not a brief reception, a live reception following the event, so you're more than welcome to also engage with Dr. Davidson at this time and ask whatever questions you may have. But in the moment, if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand, and Brandy will walk the microphone over to you, and we will do a little Q&A. Dr. Green.
What? Oh, dear.
Yes, thank you.
Should we be grading right now?
What? Shouldn't I be grading right now? Probably.
Do you mind telling a story of the dissertation defense where we...
Telling the story of the dissertation defense?
It's an important story because it's partly how you came to be...
Yeah. Okay. All right. So...
I'm interested to hear your side of the story.
Oh, yeah. That is interesting. I've never told you that story, but I've told it to other people. It's Dr. Bingham. He's my boss. So, okay, so the power of showing up is what this is about. My friend, Nate Hodges, was defending his dissertation. There were only 5 members of my cohort for my PhD program, and he was one of them. And so I was pretty committed to attending all of their defenses. And I had just defended my dissertation in March, and I had applied for a job in the Honors College, and I was really excited about that job. And I emailed the search committee director and found out on Monday that I had not been interviewed for that job and that they'd offered it to somebody else. and I was not happy. We were in a low employment situation at the time, and I really needed a job, but this also was a job that I felt like was really fitting for me, and so I was super disappointed. But because Nate was defending his dissertation, and I believe in supporting my friends, and I believe in showing up to things, I baked cookies and I went to the dissertation defense. So I am there, and they introduced the committee members, and I realized, oh yeah, that's right. Sean Bingham from the Honors College is on Nate's committee. And so after Nate defended, I went up and I was like, hi, I'm Lindy Davidson, and I applied for a job, and I didn't get interviewed. And but it seems that you've already picked somebody else. And he said, oh, actually, you know what? That didn't go through the way we thought. What's your name again? And then I was interviewed like a week later, and I got the job. So if like when I said I got this job because I showed up, I literally got this job because I showed up. And it was not a day when I felt much like showing up. Those were stress-baked cookies. But they were pretty good. I may have baked my way into that position, come to think of it. So I'm really grateful for it. That's what you were thinking. Oh, yeah. All right.
Are there any other questions?
Anybody else? Oh, down front. Hi, Haley.
So what would you say to people with like terminal illnesses like maybe dementia or like MS and don't have the ability to finish well or finish strong?
Right. Well, I think there's a difference between what we think of as finishing well. Like everybody has this different idea of what it means to die, to come to the very end and to die. And death is not pretty. Right? I think we were made for life. And death is something that should bring us sadness. And because we were made for life, that it feels wrong and it feels bad and it will be. But because of that, I feel like we back way away from it and we don't acknowledge the life that is lived up to the very end. And there is real life that exists in those places. If you have the opportunity to volunteer with hospice or to go visit hospice patients, you will find them living. Because when they're dead, they're no longer hospice patients, right? Then they are buried or cremated or whatever, they're dead. But the end of life is actually still real life. And because of that, we have the opportunity to live it in the best way that we can. To help people to be comfortable, maybe the best we can do at that point. But there's a real value in comfort, and comfort can come from a lot of things, not just medical science, but from family, from good music that's being played, from food, from friends, from laughter, fun stories, movies that you like, or songs that you want to sing or play. There are a lot of things about ending well that don't have anything to do with your medical condition, but I feel like we've medicalized everything about the end so that particularly in the medical world, it's hard to see what the rest of life is about. So in my research, which I somehow skipped right through, I talked to these parents. I interviewed parents of seriously ill children. They were either in hospice or eligible for palliative care, which means they were really sick kids. Some of them were terminally ill, some of them were just complex. But I talked to their parents about how they made decisions. And they would make decisions based off of a variety of things. First of all, if they found out that their kid was diagnosed with something, they would go and do exactly what you would do if you found out you were diagnosed with some illness that you'd never heard of. You would Google it. right? So you find out what it is, you find out all the treatments, the clinical trials and everything that's going on. And these parents would do all of those things. But then sometimes they would make a decision that did not seem to match up with all of that data and all of that information, because the information was only one of the things that they were building with. Like, they had the information block, but that was the only block anybody in the medical institution could even see. They were also building with, well, what am I going to tell my other children? What's going to happen with grandma? Who's going to take care of these situations? What about my teenage son who's getting in trouble and is in juvenile detention? What about my spiritual beliefs that factor into this? What do I think is going to happen with our finances? And how do I live with myself as a person afterwards if I make X decision? Those things you can't see in a clinic. And so that is the piece of life, and it's a much bigger piece really than the medical piece oftentimes that people are building with that's not even acknowledged. But there's a lot of richness that can be gained from those pieces. So if you're really tapping into your spiritual identity and what you're doing is rich there, you could have a really good life laying in a hospital bed or being really sick, because the thing that you value most is still intact. And I think that was part of what I was realizing even as a patient in the hospital bed. So I lay in a hospital bed for 7 weeks, but there was nothing wrong with me. It was all my son inside. And so that was not a very exciting time for me. It's pretty boring to lay in a hospital bed for 7 weeks. But there were things going on in me that were not indicated by my surroundings. And so people would ask me, like, what's going on that you're okay? That this is an okay thing that's happening. And it was all about what was going on outside the hospital or in my heart or in my head, and not what was happening physically around me. So I don't know if that was a lot of words for a really short question. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer this question.
Given your experience with thinking about end of life, could you say something? What kind of advice would you give to us all about how to relate to our own death? Like, how does the awareness of death and the meditations you had with regards to different kinds of experiences with life and how you might end well? I mean, how does that might inform us today?
Whew, that's like a whole book probably. So I think it's important to know what you think about death. And it's okay to think about it. So, I mean, we're so stilted in our ability to think about death, it's hard for people to even go there, so to speak. But if you don't know what you think about it, if you haven't given yourself permission to actually think about why your life is valuable for starters and what you might make of the end of it, then it's going to be really hard to finish well, because you'll just be trying to stave off and ignore. It's sort of like pretending. When we pretend to be anything or do anything, we spend so much energy covering over the reality so that we can put on the face of pretense. We don't have anything left for actual reality. And so if we spend a lot of energy denying and staving off conversations about death or thoughts about what will happen, I'm trying to steer clear of suicidal ideation here. Like, I don't think you should sit around thinking about like how I'm going to die. That would not be good. But I think that people go there sometimes because no one can talk to people about like the reality of the 100%, statistic that's out there. So if we're not gonna talk about it here, then we have these very maybe unhealthy ways of relating to it. But if we can see it as the reality and think about, well, what do I think about this? what do I believe is the value of my life and the meaning of it ending, then we won't know how to finish well. And so, I mean, that's for me, it's a spiritual journey, you know, to figure that out, and then to live in a way that is meaningful, based on what I think life means. So, I mean, to me, that is something very, very dear that I've staked my life on. And so to live in such a way that reflects that is really what I'm going for. Now, I don't live up to that all the time, most of the time, but that's what I think gets us to a place where we can finish well, is to know what it means to finish.
Part B of the question that was just asked, I think it's important for us to be able to talk to each other as you have raised this issue. I too am an instructor here, and very often my students will mention a grandparent is ill and perhaps getting ready to pass away. Also, sadly, maybe a parent. I myself am somebody who has stage 1 cancer, and just 2 weeks ago, my 33-year-old son asked me what I thought about dying. And I was caught off guard, I really was. So I'm wondering, could you tell us, give us some ideas about how to construct good communication about what we think about that?
I think you should ask the woman sitting to your left about that. So this is a comm department contingency over here that's posing this question. And Lori, who was pictured earlier up here, was my major professor, and I credit her with my dissertation existence. So those conversations are hard, and we don't like hard conversations. We're really not good at discourse at all, I think, in our society. Like we know how to yell at people, and we know how to talk about things that we already agree about, but talking about difficult things, I think we have fewer and fewer skills in that area, which is hard. But venturing into ground that is choppy like that is difficult. I think requires maybe many starts, many attempts, and being okay with just talking about one piece of it. And there are lots of publications out there. There are lots of documents out there to direct these conversations. Actually, the Conversation Project is a project to get people to talk about end-of-life issues. But any conversation that is difficult, that hits on things that people aren't comfortable talking about, is hard to just start. But I think just starting it is really the big part. Because if we're willing to be open and vulnerable with the people that we care about the most, then I would hope that would be received well. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like you should know about this as much as I should. So you're just asking me that because I'm sitting up here and you're sitting over there. That's not nice. I'm going to remember that next time you're on stage. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be pretty or neat, and there's no formula for it. We're always, communication scholars, we're always asked for, oh, could you give me the one-sheeter on how to have this difficult conversation? There actually are some published. I'm not very happy about them because I'm like, oh, thank you. You boiled down my entire dissertation into one page. But they're complex. They're these like weird, unwieldy Lego structures that don't look quite like anything you would want to neatly build. And so they are kind of ongoing and might have a piece of it one day and then another piece of it here and another piece there, but eventually building towards a common understanding of what you're hoping to be able to leave behind, so that when you leave this world and your family is there, that they will be able to take hold of what's happened in the best way that they can, to tell your story in a way that makes sense to them, that they can live with. Because that's what I learned from my advisor, is that you want people to be able to live on, to be able to tell the story and in a way that's positive and meaningful for them.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
You win, Viveka.
Alright, I thought about like a second question we were just talking right now, but we'll see what happens. So, you were talking about how like you came out of school, you came out of seminary, and then you had this whole like family experience, and then you decided to go back to school and you chose health communications and everything. I just want to know like, how did you apply that kind of like, I want to learn more, like I want to research this, I want to get into this academically for something that was so personal for you. And the second part to that is just, you're here now at the Honors College, you're doing so many great things with all of these students. Is this where like Lindy's going to be like forever? Like can we all be planners at Honors College? Or is there something else that you're moving up to? Is there like a next step that you're planning?
Okay, well that is a lot to ask. So I wanted to go back to school and look at this because I am a nerd at heart, right? I love to study. The only reason that I'm not taking more classes now is because I was forbidden. I was told that this was a terminal degree and that terminal had a real meaning to it, that you were done and cut off. So anyhow, I like to study. I like to learn new things. So it seemed like just the most sensible way to figure something out. I mean, my Master's of Divinity is a function of my own personal curiosity, right? So other people are like, I think I'll read a book. I'm like, I'll go get a degree about that. So there might be like some sort of pharmaceutical solution, I don't know, but I like to study, and so that made the most sense to me. Also, in the hospital, when you began to talk to a lot of doctors, you realize that that's a pretty staunch hierarchy, and that if you aren't doctor somebody, you don't have a lot of credibility, and that's unfortunate. Because there are a lot of people who are experts on the experience of a patient in a hospital who do not have any letters before or after their name. But the reality is, if you want to get in and teach and train and work to improve that system, I wanted to intersect that system in the training process. Here you are, right? So that's exactly what I'm doing. I mean, the curtain is lifted, the veil is lifted, like my whole agenda to take over the world is to intersect with doctors as they're being trained before they hit the clinic or the hospital. So I thought that was my best shot at being able to do something about this system where people couldn't communicate with each other, because I wanted to do something about it. And it was very personal, but I met so many people there too. And unfortunately, the NICU is not a place that is equal in terms of representing populations. people who are poorer, who are minorities, are much more likely to be in a NICU setting or have seriously ill kids. Because if you have a NICU child, they're more likely to be sick for a long time. So it's very discriminatory. And I felt like there were not a lot of people who were ever going to be able to walk out of that situation and speak into the training process. But I was privileged enough to be able to do that, and I really wanted to. So that's why I went back to school. And so what I'm doing right now is exactly what I want to be doing. Yeah. That's what I have.